The islands of Hawaii rest alone in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. 7 main islands, totaling less than 6,500 square miles, they are isolated by 2,500 miles of ocean from the continental United States, and are separated from each other by channels too wide for bridges and too rough for ferries. A most unlikely spot for a railroad. By 1900, there were 4 common carriers on the 3 major islands, and each large sugar plantation had its own narrow-gauge line. This at a time before the Panama Canal, when everything needed to build a railroad had to be brought to Hawaii in parts by ship. A perilous trip of at least 4 months around South America's Cape Horn. Besides distance, other physical obstacles stood in the way, especially on Hawaii, the Big Island. Volcanic in origin, the land is mostly hard lava. Long, deep gulches cut in from the 300-foot bluffs along the shore. Between these depressions are steeply rolling hills, and in the center of the island rise the nearly 14,000-foot volcanoes that created it, Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa. These volcanoes are still active and threaten anything built between them and the sea. But this land, with its tropical climate, was perfect for growing sugarcane. Planters came from all over the world to these small islands, and by the 1860s, 22 large plantations were prospering. The Civil War created a large market for Hawaiian sugar in the northern states whose supply from Louisiana had been cut off. After the war, the Reciprocity Treaty of 1876 allowed Hawaiian sugar to enter the U.S. duty-free in return for the area now known as Pearl Harbor. Sugar was sweet in Hawaii. Sugarcane is an extremely heavy and bulky crop, one which loses quality quickly after cutting. 40 to 70 tons of cut cane per acre must be rushed to the mill before the sugar content is diminished. With mills operating 24 hours a day, 10 months of the year, the arrival of cane must be steady even through the night. The raw sugar produced must be kept dry as it is transported to the ships for U.S. markets. Without an available harbor, mills along the Hamakua coast devised elaborate cable systems to load the sugar onto waiting cargo ships. Others built small docks and used lighters to row the sugar out. But rough seas and bad weather often interrupted or destroyed these shipments. Railroads, to transport both the cane to the mill and then the raw sugar and molasses to the wharf, were the answer. All of the Hawaiian railroads used narrow gauge but one. This was the standard gauge Hilo Railroad. Conceived and begun in 1899 by Benjamin F. Dillingham, the railroad built its yards in Waiakea, just east of Hilo, and slowly spread south. The first goal was the Olaha Plantation, 19,500 acres, the largest sugar plantation in the territory. The land being cleared here of ohia trees provided the railroad's ties. In 1906, Trans-Pacific steamships began landing regularly in Hilo, and a new business era began. By 1908, the Hilo Railroad had lines spread from the Waiakea yards through Olaha Plantation as far as Glenwood, near Kilauea Volcano, and around the south point of the island to the lava flows. Branches ran up to Pahoa and the Hawaiian Mahogany Lumber Company. Also known as the Pahoa Lumber Company, it cut from the ohia and koa forests near the Kilauea Volcano and produced ties not only for the plantation railroads, but was also under contract to the Sante Fe. 3 Shea engines handled the loads for this lumbering operation. All of these areas contained fairly gentle grades with no major obstructions, and moved passengers, mail, and a variety of goods along the entire line. A drawbridge across the Wailoa River continued the line into Hilo Town. With a population of 22,000, Hilo was a bustling town supported by the railroad, carrying over 100,000 tons of freight annually.
The building of this railroad and the plantation ula contributed more than all else to the advancement of Hilo. It was the means of bringing more skilled labor to the district, for there were shops established, and the mechanics must have homes. The railroad company provided for some, and the men built others, until Waiakea, the original depot site, became a village in itself. James T. Stacker, 1913.
At this time, the Hilo Railroad boasted two 10-wheel all-purpose engines from Baldwin Locomotive Works of Philadelphia, number 99, named Ola'a, and number 3, the Kilauea. These engines had Radley and Hunter bonnet stacks, sometimes called balloon stacks. They were originally designed to burn wood, which was quite plentiful in the early days of the railroad. A small 042T saddle tanker, the Hilo number 33, shared this feature. A conversion to coal, and then to oil, was made by 1908. Thereafter, all engines on the Hilo Railroad burned imported oil. An 060 from the Sierra Railroad in California was rebuilt on arrival in Hilo to a 262 and numbered 5. The Hilo wharf was woefully inadequate for this increased use and in need of the protection of a breakwater. A new harbor was far too expensive for either the railroad or the territory of Hawaii, so the United States Congress was appealed to for help. The Rivers and Harbors Bill would provide the funds for expanding the harbor and building a breakwater if the Hilo Railroad extended their service 50 miles north to the large isolated mills along the Hamakua coast as far as the Honoka'a Mill. Thus began the design and construction of one of the most challenging and expensive lines in Hawaii. Known as the Hamakua Division, work began in June 1909 with a small crew of men, less than 75 in all. The first section, of 12.5 miles, from the Hilo station to Hakalau Mill, began with a low concrete bridge, 450 feet long over the Wailuku River, heading north. Each end was built up with rock for about 150 feet. Because of the size of the river and the ocean swells affecting the area, divers had to be employed to work on 46 footings placed on solid rock 25 feet below sea level. The right-of-way then maintained an average elevation of 250 feet near the coast, with a maximum grade of 1.4%. This section was completed by 1911. But the 200 inches of rain per year, valuable for the sugarcane, had carved many gulches and stream beds in the landscape. The smaller openings were crossed employing combinations of bridges, cuts, and culverts. Culvert footings had to be dug, forms built, then concrete poured in place. A few required steel trestles, and the cost of these few miles neared $800,000. This, however, turned out to be a drop in the bucket. The next 21 miles took another 3 years to complete and covered some of the most rugged terrain on the island. At a cost of $106,000 per mile, construction included 211 water crossings, cuts removing over 2 million cubic yards of lava rock, tunnels totaling 3,100 feet, 29 wooden trestles, and 13 steel bridges. All but one of the bridges were over 100 feet high. One was over 1,000 feet long, and another required an 18-degree curve. The magazine Paradise of the Pacific reported in its September 1913 issue, "There is not 100 yards of track as the surveyor found it. That is, not 100 yards in which the rails were laid direct. It had to be a matter of fill, cut, trestle, or bridge throughout the whole length of the journey." In the meantime, the railroad hauled rock for the construction of the breakwater from Kapoho in the south. For 1 linear foot of breakwater, 65 tons of rock were needed. In the first 2 years of construction, almost 150,000 tons were freighted by the railroad. A popular excursion train ride took those interested out to check on the progress. When the breakwater was completed, the work engine was sold to the Hilo Railroad to help with the construction of the Hamakua line. Numbered 15, it began as a California Pacific 440 in 1868 and continued in service, carrying passengers on the Hamakua Division until 1929. As the line slowly progressed along the coast, camps would be established near the major points of construction, usually at the site of a large trestle or tunnel. Since these crossings would take many months to build, housing was provided for the workers, and they were transported to the day's work by train. If the construction was still isolated from the line, the workers would be transported by wagon. Some of the supervisors moved their families with them, establishing homes for them along the way. One of these was the Beers family. Both William and Ed Beers were supervisors. A photographic record of the progress of the line was kept by a family member and compiled into an album which has survived. Those photographs and the comments written to friends and family on the mainland are an invaluable resource today.
Hanamu House and Camp. Kids and Japanese girl in road. Clara and I on Lanai. See cut sugarcane and the beautiful ocean.
All the steel for the trestles was brought into Hilo by ship to the dock the railroad company had built near the Waiakea yard. At the yard, the bents and girders were assembled and stored. As they were needed, they were loaded for transport onto flat cars. The crane seemed to work only sporadically, so often this loading was done by hand. Typically, cuts would be made until the line reached the edge of a crossing. Small waterways only required a culvert or short wooden bridge. For larger crossings, the track would be laid to the edge, allowing a crane to be brought in and placed. If it was necessary, the cable system was rigged from the crane across the opening to facilitate lowering and placing the bents and girders. As soon as the gulch was accessible, sleds with donkey engines lowered the men and supplies down the side to the bottom of the gulch to ready the site and construct the footings. When the crane and footings were ready, trains with flat cars would deliver the bents and girders to the crane as needed from the storage yards in Hilo. The bents were lowered in place by crane or cable and joined into towers. As the towers were finished, the girders were swung out and placed. Then the crane moved forward across this section to begin the next. Ties in the 60-pound track followed quickly so supplies could continue out to the crane. Often, the bridge painters, under the supervision of Ed Beers, were competing with the track gangs to finish each section. While a trestle was being assembled across any of the wide gulches, all that was necessary to continue on the other side was ferried across by cable. This included the men, all the supplies needed, the cars, and the motive power. Thus grading and construction could continue without delay. Malua is the first of 3 major gulches heading north from Hilo. It is carved from between ancient lava flows and required an approach tunnel 2,700 feet long. The tunnel opening emerges high on the steep side of the gulch. From the tunnel, the rails crossed a 6-degree curved trestle, 140 feet high and 1,006 feet long, before reaching the other side, turning left, and continuing along the coast. The second large gulch, Lapahoihoi, was so deep and wide, the roadbed was cut downgrade back along the side of the cliffs to a narrower point. The curved trestle built there, then the line returned upgrade to the coast along the other side. Even employing this technique, the height of the trestle was 130 feet. Further north, in one 3-mile section, the right-of-way had to be carved below the level of the fields for 4,000 feet, from a 225-foot cliff rising out of the Pacific Ocean to reach the Ka'awali'i Gulch, the last of the 3. Then an 18-degree curved trestle 485 feet long and 140 feet high had to be constructed before the line could continue to the O'Okala mill. In anticipation of the additional freight and the planned special tourist excursion trains, 3 Baldwin 10-wheelers were ordered. Number 108 arrived in 1908, 191 equipped with a whaleback tender followed in 1910, then 192 in 1912. All burned oil and were never given names. The Hilo Railroad lines finally reached Pauilo by early 1913, only 6 miles short of the Honoka'a mill. This is as far as it would ever go. The cost of the Hamakua Division extension had put the railroad so far in debt that bond coupons were not being paid, and the railroad went into receivership. The total cost for the Hilo Railroad from its beginning in 1899 to receivership in 1915 was well over $6 million, a record amount for a 100-mile railroad. A foreclosure sale to the bondholders, mostly men who represented the sugar plantations served by the railroad, was held in March 1916, and for $1 million, the Hilo Railroad Company became the Hawaii Consolidated Railway Limited. At the time of the sale, the roster included 8 locomotives. The new owners immediately ordered additional rolling stock, including 3 coaches, to accommodate and increase the tourist trade, and a consolidation-type engine from the American Locomotive Company. Known as number 196, it was the only 280 on the roster. The last locomotive ordered was another Baldwin 460. Following the established custom of the old Hilo Railroad, one digit was removed from the engine's building date to give it the number 121. The incredible engineering of the Hamakua Division paid off in the popularity of the Scenic Express sightseeing specials. These were scheduled to run whenever passenger ships were in the port of Hilo. Stopping at various points along the way, passengers could disembark to get a better view. The high trestles were favorite stops, with views of the fantastic coastline on one side, waterfalls flowing from tropical jungles with mountains above on the other. Equipped with wicker armchairs and a buffet car serving a pot roast lunch, it was a first-class tour for 30 passengers. In 1920, the railway began servicing 4 new large plantations, and was doing so well that the old 3-stall roundhouse was replaced with a new 8-stall concrete building. Built modern in every way and entirely fireproof, this building still stands, and although in poor repair, is in use today as a garage. When heavy winter storms and a tsunami damaged the Wailuku River Bridge in 1923, and it collapsed 2 months later, a new 3-span steel bridge was erected. Passenger business was booming with more than 600,000 revenue passengers annually, but the competition of the automobile was being felt, and fares began to fall off gradually. By 1936, only 16,000 rode the train, and many coaches were converted to carry bagasse, the fibrous waste product of cane crushing used in ceiling tile. Rail buses and motor cars with trailers replaced many of the regular train runs. But the advent of World War II turned this trend around and created a high demand to transport soldiers and supplies to the terminus in Pauwilo, as close as the line came to the large U.S. Marine training camp, Camp Tarawa, 20 miles away near Waimea. For the first time in its history, the railroad was looking like it would be out of debt. Unfortunately, Mother Nature had another challenge to throw in its way. On April 1st, 1946, at 7 a.m., just after the northbound morning freight left the yards, a tsunami traveling at 512 miles per hour from the Aleutian Islands crashed into the northeast side of the Big Island, generating waves 50 feet high, followed by several slightly smaller waves. The damage caused to the railway lines was irreparable. Engine number 121, pulling that morning's freight along the bay, was swept off the tracks, and all the cars were scattered. The Hilo station, located on the bay at the mouth of the Wailuku River, disappeared completely. The warehouses at the Hilo dock were smashed, and the loaded freight cars there crushed, swept inland, or carried out to sea. Tracks were torn up or undermined, and 60% of the breakwater destroyed. Several bridges and trestles lost towers and were left with tracks dangling. One section of the Wailuku River Bridge out of Hilo was carried upstream and wrapped around the highway bridge. Cut off from the docks and terminal, the Hamakua Division was left isolated. The Hawaii Consolidated Railway was out of business. Today, the Mamalahoa Highway follows much of the old railroad right-of-way. The Hakalau Trestle survived both the tsunami and the scrappers to be converted into a highway bridge. The remains of the mill, destroyed by the waves, is still visible from the bridge. 2 surviving spans of the Wailuku River Bridge were moved to support the new Kolikoli Highway Bridge. A few buildings, once used to transfer sugar, are now abandoned or used as storage. Scattered along the coast, a few of the high Trestles concrete footings remain. Very little evidence is left of a once active and spectacular railroad. Built at a time when the Hamakua coast was producing 1/4 of the sugar in the territory of Hawaii and was the most populated area on the largest island, yet was only accessible by a dirt wagon track, the Hilo Railroad promised a new era of development. In providing a vital link in transporting Hawaiian sugar safely to market, it also created new opportunities for businesses and residents previously limited by distance. As a bonus, it opened up one of the most remarkably engineered and spectacular scenic routes to be found anywhere.
Lauren A. Thurston reported in the Hawaiian Annual of 1914, "The gulches are filled and the cliffs thickly dotted with pandanus palms, breadfruit, coconuts, ferns, and tropical jungle, which interspersed at rapid intervals with villages, cane fields, giant sugar mills, and waterfalls of all sizes and heights, presents a kaleidoscopic series of contrasts of the grand, the beautiful, and up-to-date civilization and utilitarianism that is absolutely unique."
And according to a quote of Roy D. Johnson, a Sante Fe agent touring the line in 1913, the Hamakua Division was the most wonderful 34 miles of railroad in the United States, and I think the world.